Hello and welcome back to Split Decision. We have somehow made it to double digits, and as some of you have been asking for, it is time for us to do our PICKEMS. So we are going to take a look through both of our PICKEMS. We have done them separately, as you will very soon realize, because Mitch, I think we have some severe differences in the PICKEMS that we've got going on. And, well, I want to make sure that I haven't got... These are your ones. Okay, so these are mine on the other side. I want to make sure I haven't got these mixed up, because to start things off, we're going to go straight in. We're going to go through all of the beginning matches of Alpha Group, and then we're going to go into the quarterfinals, semifinals, and then we'll move on to Omega Group for what we've predicted. Now, kicking things off, NRG versus Koi. I didn't think that we were going to have like any disagreements this early on, but I have NRG, the team built of Artis and the old Optic core, and you've gone with New Boys on the Block Koi. Now, I'm not that angry about this one, I'll be honest, but I just want to know your reasons why.
I mean, for me, this is a decision based entirely in reality and in fact. Coldamenta putting a roster together to compete on the international stage. What can we say? This is a story I've seen a million times, and he seems to succeed every single time. I find it hard to knock him, and if you've got a project with this guy co-signing it, I don't need to have anything else to say about it. I'm already on board until he fails, and he hasn't failed me yet.
You're on board until he fails, so if he loses this time, you're off the board again.
Then I'm gone. Coldamenta, you and I are finished. But for now, I'm with you, buddy.
Yeah, I do think that Koi are going to come in with a decent team. The only problem I have is I feel like they've got one of the hardest draws in the entirety of the tournament. Like, I think NRG coming back in with sort of the backbone of what was that old Optic roster. They brought in Som, who I think is actually going to be someone who really shines. I think someone who is a very young and talented CS player, so I don't really expect him to go into this one and put in a poor performance. And then obviously Artis coming in as a replacement for Ye. And I'll be honest with you, there's a part of me now that thinks with this new meta change away from Chamber that Artis might actually be the more valuable player. So I don't know. I think that Koi are going to be strong. I think it's going to be competitive. I do not see them beating NRG though. I think NRG are genuinely one of the favorites for the whole tournament.
Yeah, I want to be clear on this one. I feel like I'm going with the lower end statistic. I'm pretty confident about that going in.
You do PICKEMS.
But no, honestly, I can see a reality where Koi end up taking it. I want my 1% of people have correctly guessed this so far. I want to have that screenshot. But also the fact that like I know that NRG could easily qualify out of this bracket. That's going to be the case for a lot of the teams we end up discrediting as we move through. But the reality is right here. I want to believe in Artis, and look, there's absolutely no way that I'll be surprised if NRG do walk away with the win. But for me, I want to throw in that one last hurrah for Coldamenta. I want to see what he can do here with this Koi roster, and you know, who's to say he could come in and surprise us all.
Well, next up, I think that this one we've both got going the same way, which is Giants beating Detonation. I think that ultimately Detonation are a team that come in with a few players that we're definitely going to recognize. Like, you've got Suggest, who was previously playing on the likes of Newturn, solid player. Takage, who was in Zeta. I think Zimfree as well, used to be on North Epsion, same as Soldam. Not bad players, but I think rather than sort of critiquing what I'm seeing with Detonation of their brand new roster, it's actually more so I just think Giants are going to be incredibly strong.
I mean, this is a puzzle that fits together very well. I enjoy the look of the roster. I think it brings me back to some of those beta days or shortly thereafter when we saw Hoodie transition over. It was a jet that he was picking up back then. Could be viable moving into this tournament. Who knows? For the Giants roster, having someone like Nukia as well. I mean, we heralded him as possibly the strongest player in the world at one point. Certainly one of the top in EMEA for a long, long time. To see him come back in, international stage, good group of players behind him that have all proven themselves at the top level in their regions respectively. There's no reason that they can't go far, and I think on the other side, I don't see that same level of promise. I don't see those same win conditions being ticked already.
Well, that's the thing. The player I'm most excited for was actually not on your list, and that's Cloud. I think that Cloud in Na'Vi was incredible. I think he's a great Sova. He can play duelist. I think that he's also one of the younger players still within the tournament. And I think he's one of the hottest properties in all of EMEA. So I think
Fair.
if they can get the right fit, the only thing I've been worried about is how good Rhyme is going to be as an IGL, because that's not something that's really been tested thus far. But with Pipson as coach, I think this is going to be a really, really strong team. So unfortunately, that does mean I'm maybe underestimating Detonation on what they'll actually be able to do, because I don't think there's too many teams in this whole tournament that I'll be like, okay, they're going to be able to beat this roster from Giants. Moving on, though, I don't think we have any differences on this one either. We've got Loud winning over Gen.G.
Yep. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward bet, really. I think Loud right now, they've got a core roster that's achieved a lot. They've got a couple weeks to prepare coming into this, or to months even. Yeah. I find it hard to believe that they'll struggle all too much in that opening matchup. I think that the Gen.G side, I mean, they're not terrible by any means, but they haven't been doing terribly well looking at their past record, and I think that's all that really needs to be said. Recently, nothing but L's on the page, and even if you look at something like King coming over there, previous DRX, and he was fantastic there. Well, even recently losing to the DRX roster, it just seems like a team that's going to need a lot more time to cook up whatever they've got planned.
Yeah, I think I will say that I'm very excited to see Meteor again. I think he was one of the bright, shining players from North Eption, and I think he was probably one of the most exciting players we've seen make it to one of those international events. Obviously, even still within the last chance qualifiers of the Korean side of things, they lost to Onslayers, they lost to Edward. So I still think that even he might not be enough to drag them through. And I think when you've got players like Aspas, Les, and Sadak, okay, sure, you lost a couple of big pieces, but even Kawazin coming in, I think it's a lot of young players. It's a very good IGL, and I think the Loud are still going to be fearsome, maybe just not quite as fearsome as the old roster just yet.
Yeah, maybe someone like TS can surprise us. I mean, it seems like he's had a couple of good games under his belt, but again, at the end of the day, it comes down to the competition that they're up against just has achieved so much more as a core that it's hard to argue against them.
So next up, we've got Carmine Corp FPX. This one, I think for you, it might have been a slightly easier decision looking at what's coming up a little bit later on. Well, but for me, I was actually kind of almost 50-50 on this one. I think that from what I've seen of the FPX roster thus far, I think they could surprise a couple of teams. Not because I think strategically they're the most amazing roster in the world. I think they're just explosive. It's something we've seen with Chinese teams in CSGO as well, where it's they can win crazy upset games because they've just got ridiculous raw individual skill. And I think it was Uicore who I was watching. I was just okay, this guy's just got it. And they were pushing so much. The reason I've gone with Carmine Corp, though, is because I think that will actually play into their hands. If I'm looking at a team that's got raw individual skill, you've got Scream, Navira, and XMS. I think they're all going to be great. So ultimately, I think that will be the sort of battle that they win. It's other matches I think they might struggle a bit more.
Yeah, I think for KC, they've got a really good role set, essentially, between Scream. Obviously, he'll be able to cover a bunch, but it was more XMS. Him coming in as a controller in my head, he's going to be able to flex into absolutely anything. He could go down the duelist route if he wanted to. Well, he used to play for a fantastic team called Alliance. He was quite a strong controller there. We brought him in. I think that was moving into Masters. I think it was the first team that qualified for Masters ever in EMEA.
I'm not sure it was.
No, I'm actually, now that I think of it, I'm 100% sure, funnily enough. So yeah, he was really good there, and bullshit a little bit, hey, XMS. But he's gonna be coming in here, ability to play duelist. He can play his smoker, but you look at someone like Shin, who's sticking on this roster, so himself and Nuzera are sticking around from before. Nuzera has been flexing in on your KO, your Sova. He's playing some of those initiator setups that Shin likes to play alongside a controller. It's they've got a perfect mix and match to take it wherever they need it. If they play a player in a role and he's not feeling so comfortable, very easy to swap it up and try a new face on it. I imagine that's something they saw in the early days of practice. For me, this team, they've got a lot of promise to them on their own. They've been working it out, Shin and Nuzera. You bring in these stars, though, of Scream and Navera, and then put in XMS as a solid backbone. Look, very difficult team to argue with, and I've always wanted to see Scream play on that team where he's able to actually communicate in French. He might be able to come in with some, like, between himself and XMS, I think in-game leading is going to be incredibly strong. Any gaps that are there will be filled in instantly from my impression of these two players, at least. So just a strong team overall. Allez les gars.
This next one, I will say, was probably one of, if not the easiest. It's going to probably annoy some Turkish fans out there, and I'm sorry for that, but DRX for me are just coming in as one of the favorites for the entire thing. Like, they're so strong as a unit. They haven't really changed anything other than bringing, from what I've heard, a very explosive duelist that they can sort of throw in as their sixth man, or maybe even throw in replacement on one or two maps. I think that's going to be tough to beat. And for BBL, I genuinely think it might be one of the worst opponents they could have come up against. Like a heavily structured, incredibly strong in retakes. Like, you can try your fast-paced style and use that individual skill, but unless, and we have a lot of respect for you, Vlad, unless you've pulled off some miracles from the team we saw before to the team we see now, I don't see a chance in hell of them being DRX.
That's the reality right now. I mean, it sounds harsh, it's rough, but you know, players are just going to be suffocated. Someone like Cutie coming in may be going to benefit from Chamber taking a backseat, but the reality is, like, I think about him up against the DRX roster, 1, 2, 3 rounds, you can surprise them, but once DRX have you put in a box, they know how you play, they will just suffocate. And I don't see a way that BBL, with what we've seen from them before, will be able to this quickly pivot to a team that can beat that and beat what DRX brings to the table. Very few teams on the global stage can.
I think, like, some of the additions, like Brave, for example, I think it is going to be fantastic, but just this is the worst matchup. DRX always start really strong in tournaments as well. They're not one of the teams that, like, falls into lower brackets and has to run it back. So yeah, I think we can quite quickly move on from this one. Now, again, we've gone the same way on this one, but I do think this, in terms of opening matches, I'm a little bit pissed off it's even happened, if I'm being brutally honest, because I think both of these teams could have gone quite far. PaperX versus Cloud9, Mitch.
Yeah, this is one that we could definitely see at least a semi-final matchup. A sad one to kick it off, and I think we're gonna have this exact same conversation in the next group down towards the bottom. But yeah. You've got Ye coming in, and thinking about the nerf to Chamber, I honestly think Ye is going to pivot just fine. I think he's a player individually, mechanically so gifted that he's not going to be, you know, knocked down enough that it's going to be tangible. For you know, your bottom 50% players, not all of a sudden going to be like, oh, I can just duel Ye, it's easy. No, he's still going to rip your head off. He's just going to be punished for it a little bit more often in those trades and so on. The Cloud9 roster is incredibly strong. I actually feel bad that we're both going against them, because that's not in any way representative of this series. I would look at it as a coin flip, with probably a little bit of bias from us being the separating factor.
The other thing as well is, I'm just looking at the sort of record of recent times of sort of first matches in tournaments. I sort of expect PaperX to come in with a load of really sort of explosive, ridiculous ideas that are gonna be awkward for other teams to play against. You'd look at them sort of like Masters Copenhagen. They came in, they won their first 3 games, then okay, it went well, I say that, they basically lost to FPX right towards the end. Then in the first game, okay, they were a little bit shaky versus Edward at Champions, but they still ultimately got through that game. They're quite good in the early stages. It's when teams try and figure them out that they sometimes fall. I don't think Cloud9 are the same. We saw it recently in their first tournament. Okay, it's their first tournament, so I'll give them a little bit of slack. But they started a bit slow. And they lost to Focus, which, no offense to Focus, I like that team. But they shouldn't get anywhere near Cloud9. They shouldn't get anywhere near a lot of the franchise teams. So the fact is that they lost to that, it scares me quite a bit. Now, I do think, like, as you said, like, Ye being flexible, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I also think Zelsis is actually a really underrated pickup, because you're going to look at, like, Ye, and I think a lot of people are still going to give credit to Zelsis, but he's mega flexible. He's got so many different roles and agents that he can play, so if they win this game, I'm looking at him, and obviously, as always, I'm looking at Vanity, but I think it's cool. We got 2 great in-game leaders, a lot of firepower with, like, Jing and Forsaken, and just PaperX are crazy. So I've got to go with them to win their opening game. This next one, though, I think this is the next split we have. And again, I'll be honest, This one for me is another 50-50. Like, there's one reason why I've gone for Heretics, but I'll let you be annoyed at me first for not picking BCJ.
Yeah, no, I'm going to be right off the bat. I mean, BCJ, look, he's had his fair share of doubters in the past, man, and
he has.
I don't know.
I didn't rep the set enough, and you told me about it midway through that tournament.
I got that picture with BCJ after the game, man, me holding the sign, believed in it all along. Me and my boys.
Wasn't that also an Enzo sign?
I have a Polaroid, so that's like, I don't know what you'd call evidence, I think. So I don't know about that.
I actually think there's a lot of evidence.
I don't forgeries, AI art, all this stuff going on, Tom.
Okay,
I'm not sure what to believe. All I know is good hard evidence from a Polaroid camera which captured me holding a sign for BCJ with BCJ after his victory. So that's all I can say. And you know what, Tom, just for you, I'll get another one of those pictures after this victory, because you can be in the background crying your little eyes out.
Well, I'll give you my reason. I think that both teams for me coming into the tournament are probably about in the same place. Like, I don't have massively high expectations. I think that especially, well, actually not even especially EG, I think both teams will have a lot of work that needs to be done if I think they're going to be getting towards the top of either of the regions with how stacked a lot of the teams are. I don't have a problem with EG's squad or their signings. The main difference is experience. And I think, like, with BCJ and Ethan, you've got quite a bit of experience on LAN, but then you look at the other side of things, that sort of G2 core actually managed to do incredibly well at LAN events. You've also got the likes of Zeke, who was a previous Champions winner. I think that's going to help them a lot, especially in some of the early games, just not having that jitters. Kellogg's was so much better on LAN than he was online. It's not even comparable. So although they've definitely not looked the greatest in the tournaments we've seen so far, I think just even having that extra little bit of synergy might be enough for some of the less experienced players over on EG.
Kellogg's was fantastic on that. I'll give you that. I don't remember what he looks like. It's been so long. He's been sat down, relegated on this roster, just warming the seats for the rest of the team.
You can't say that. You can't say you don't remember what he looks like. No, that is rude.
Obviously, I do. He's also got a very clean look. I love the hair, man. It's beautiful. I aspire. But still, you know what I mean? It's been so long, man, since we've seen him perform at that level internationally. Now he's coming into this team. Rather, the rest of the team's coming back. It's just such a weird position for me to vote for them, especially when on the other side, I know my boy BCJ's got it together. I know everything's looking clean. That said, look, Team Heretic's going to come out. They are a punchy team. I mean, these guys, it's going to be like queuing up a ranked, but on 5 ping. Good luck.
Well, on to the next one. Again, I think we've gone slightly different ways with this one, and by slightly, I mean completely, because obviously there's only 2 answers. I went with Talon. Now, I will say not having Padapan was one of the reasons why I actually don't have them going much further than this. But I do still think that the initial core that's over on that Talon side, again, very creative. I rate Cruz, Sushi Boys, and Foxy very, very highly. They brought in a young player in Garnets as well, who's going to be there for the event. I think that they're going to be creative enough in their early matches that it will be enough to beat MIBR. And, like, this is the team that always, like, was so good in early stages of tournaments that they would, like, beat out the likes of Optic and stuff like that. So I think that that's going to be a great sign for them going forward. I do, however, think that MIBR with, like, players like Heat could be exactly the same. I don't see either of them, like, making it ridiculously far. But again, this game comes down to, okay, if Talon had Padipan, I'd probably just say outright they win. But now I'm really not sure.
So here's my reasoning. Very clean, very simple. MIBR will take this one. Home crowd advantage, man. 4th day, I think, of broadcast. If I'm assuming it's 2 every day, maybe it's 3. So maybe it's the 3rd day of broadcasts. Either way, we're going to be warmed up into the tournament a little bit. And then it does? Oh. Let's open it back up.
Not on the PICKEM one, but
I've got
on the
PICKEM
main
open.
page.
Point being, we're going to move into that game. MIBR, I don't even care if it's the first day, if it's opening game and we open and start the game 3 hours early. I think the Brazilian fans will be flooding in regardless. They will have every seat occupied. They will be loud. And listen, on the other side, this isn't a team that's inexperienced. If you take a team that's never been to LAN, never been in front of a crowd, never been in front of that many eyes even, and having to do a walkout, it's very stressful and it's a whole new experience. Not so much for these guys, and I'll give them a little bit more respect for that. But the reality is, man, like the Brazilian crowd, from what I've even heard, I've never been there before, but you told me the stories. I don't think it's going to be easy to walk out and keep your cool no matter how confident you are. When you hear the, and I think right now, if we're doing it the same as we were before, one player. So you're just going to have like, woo! Like, it's just going to be so daunting to go out to that, and just every time you make a play, every time you die, you'll just hear the crowd roar for that kill, and every time you win a round, they'll be like, what? Oh, get him next time.
It is true, but at the same time, if you can silence them, then it gets, because that's what happened when I was in Belo Horizonte. It was I think it was 10,000 people, and when they were losing, it was so quiet that it made me feel uncomfortable. So I can't imagine how it felt for the players. But do you know what? That is a fair point. That wasn't something I really took into consideration. But I guess the fans are going to be in there from the beginning, so yeah, it's fair. I can definitely see that one. Now we're going back to the top. I think this one for me. Honestly, like the fact that we obviously for you've got Koi going through because you have them beating, and then I have NRG. So I feel like our discussion points are kind of void because we both have them beating Giants anyway.
So I think at this point, we locked that in. Very different pick'ems at that point. Giants lose in the second round, so we're thinking they're going home. Okay.
The thing I will say though, if it was Giants versus Koi for me, I'd pick Giants. I have more faith in Giants going further than Koi. I do agree that Koldamenta, IGL-wise, is obviously the more experienced and better, but I think that, like, in terms of the team, I'm definitely going with Giants, so...
I don't know what to tell you, man. There's just like this voice in the back of my head just telling me Koldamenta, it's the way to go. I can see that he's gonna make it, not all the way, but most of the way.
Can we go on to the next one though?
Let's do it.
Because I will say this one pissed me off. Because I am trying to work out how in the fuck you have Carmine Corp beating Loud. Because that to me, I know that some of it's going to be like, oh, Pancada, you know, he's gone, and Sassy, he was the bald, and he's gone. But, like, realistically, the 3 core plus, like, Cowers in, I think that's a really good team. And you've got Carmine Corp, who ultimately have 2 players who are pretty much new to even anywhere near the top level. And then you're basically gambling on the trio of Scream, Navira, and XMS to beat the old champions.
Let me tell you what, if I'm going into a game and I've got XMS, I've got Navira, and I've got Scream backing me up, right? I think I'm like Rocky all of a sudden. I could go into that ring. I could take anybody, you know? Probably not. I probably would still get floored, but I feel like they're going to raise those players to the next level. They're going to bring them up to that international stage. Sure, there's going to be some jitters, but when you turn to your left and XMS is giving you that fist bump from 5 meters away and Screams on the other side saying, allez les gars.
Okay.
I think it's going to make the difference.
I have 3 words for you.
Would surprise me, but with Loud having a different core, like in the core 3,
no, the core, their core is more than Carmine Corp's core. You can't use core as an example here. Hold on.
The core that Loud have, right? I think they've lost more in those 2 players going away.
They've lost more than Carmine Corp ever had. But even still, their team is better.
Carmine Corp has come upon another bountiful roster. And now...
What?
Tom, listen, I hope for your sake that Loud win that game. That's all I'm
going to say.
So do I. I hope they do. Because if they don't, I will be insufferable. I want you to know that.
You already are for doing this in the first place. What about this then?
Right.
Okay,
I'm an
in
oracle.
terms of in-game leaders, those are my 3 words.
Go for it.
You've got Scream, and I have Sadak, who, in my opinion, is probably one of, if not the best in-game leader we have in Valorant.
We're talking Scream getting to communicate in French with XMS backing him up. That's two strong callers on the server, unified. I've seen what this guy can do when he's not using his first language. Oh! With his brother on the team. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm a fanboy. Maybe I am.
Your list is making me realize the more I look at it, the less you give a shit about IGLs. And this is the funniest thing.
Sorry,
we'll get to this in a moment.
No. Your opinion on Scream as an IGL? That
he is not proven or a good IGL as of right now. That's a fact.
All right. Okay. Cool.
Did you see Liquid play? Did you watch Liquid play?
No. Tom, that's all I needed to know. You know, that's you.
Go for it. You can put that on the record.
Here. Oh, it's already on the record. There's no putting it there. It's already there. Okay, it's on the record. Tell them to keep this in.
He's a fantastic player, but there is no evidence to say he's a good IGL. Whereas Sadak,
not a good
Sadak is a fantastic IGL.
Oh shit! I hope Loud win that game, Tom. I really do. I'm rooting for him. Because if not, I'm getting a post-game interview. You, me, and Scream, and we're gonna have a lovely chat. We're gonna have a lovely chat.
Go for it. I'll admit I doubted him. If he could prove me wrong, brilliant. But I just don't. I don't rate him as an IGL in comparison to Sadak, who won champions.
Oh, whatever. Okay, apples to oranges. Let's go.
It's not apples to oranges. Oh god.
Baguettes de croissant. What can I say?
Moving on. We've got DRX versus PaperX. Breathe. So, again, we've gone different ways on this one. This one doesn't piss me off quite as much as the last one because I think the PaperX, solid team, proven themselves to get far in tournaments in the past. Didn't do that great when it came to champions. And in all honesty, for me, DRX are a much, much safer bet.
Okay, yeah, cool. I've got a Mind Freak jersey downstairs, so I still have some contractual payback for that. So I've gone with PaperX. But on top of that, I can see a bunch of reasons why they might make it there. For example, they're a strong team. They've made very deep runs at international events before, and they've got Mind Freak.
Okay. I'm not sure the third one is an argument. You've just named a player.
I have.
There's not.
It's one of the
I could kind of do that with pretty much. I could do that with basically every member of DRX, but I won't because I'm not going to waste our time. The game below, again, it's kind of pointless because we had two different teams getting through. You've got EG beating MIBR, and I've got Heretics beating Talon. My reasoning is that, again, Talon don't have what I would expect to be their full roster with Padapan. And again, for me, like, I honestly think this lower side of the bracket is definitely a bit weaker in terms of the team. So I just think that, like, again, it's sort of much of a muchness because I think whoever wins this game, whether it's EG, MIBR, Heretics, or Talon, I think they lose the next one.
Yeah, I think that's, we each have very different setups to it, but regardless of whether it's DRX or PaperX going through, I think I have to agree with you. The thing is, though, for me, when I look at these teams, for Evil Geniuses, the reason I didn't bring up too much about PaperX, I want to talk about the next matchup, the PaperX EG that I have in my bracket. That's sort of the more beefy one for me. The Evil Geniuses run, I do wonder, on my bracket again, they come up against MIBR. Yep. That happens. The crowd there, I would love to see how a team like EG, we got BCJ out there, a man that's all too familiar with being, stapled as the villain in tournaments. You come up against MIBR, who would have the home crowd behind them. That is a matchup that I am eager to see. I want to see him playing against the crowd in Brazil.
It would be good for him. I don't know if it'd be good for... Well, maybe Ethan will probably be fine with it. I don't know about the rest of the team.
See, the thing is, though, if you just put them out on the stage now and go like, hey, you're playing a stage match, like, how would that person respond? Sure. But if you're in the team being led by BCJ and he's really going to be setting the pace for all these boys, right? Like, they're going to be following his lead going in. I think that also helps to take some of the focus off of you. Like, he'll play it up, and in that way you're kind of standing behind him. You can be as involved as you want to be, for players that do want to just, I want to get here, I want to play the game, that's all I'm doing. They don't have to get too involved in it, other than just kind of knowing, because of what your teammate's doing and how he's framing it, the crowd's going to boo you. You know what I mean? But as long as you're prepared for that going in, which I find it hard to believe anyone's going to step on stage against MIBR and go, Why is no one cheering for us, guys? We made it all the way here. Everyone have fun. Like, you're going to be like, yeah, okay, we're in Brazil. This makes sense, you know? Not saying nobody's cheering for them. It's going to be, you know, we'll be out there. Woo! But, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit one-sided for those Brazilian games.
Well, you say that. In my list, they're not even there. So,
it's true.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets
I
really messy.
probably won't be. But nonetheless, we're now going on to semifinals. Now, again, somehow... we have different semi-finals here. I would say that your upper bracket I'm not as mad at, but this is the question I have for you, right? So you have given Cordamenta, rightfully, a lot of faith based on his IGL. Now, I will say, the fact that you didn't really give the same sentiment to FNS is somewhat mind-blowing, but I didn't even think of that point. I was sort of so annoyed with everything else I've witnessed in this list. You didn't give the same to that, which
FNS
I have done.
With artists. Again, that's the important part. It's like I'm saying Cordamenta as an IGL, fantastic. Now I'm saying FNS as an IGL, also fantastic, and has one of the best duelists, possibly the best with the current meta under his belt, backing him up. So like I think you dropped the ball. I thought you were gonna go much harder against me on that one, but I got away scot-free.
Okay, but don't worry, this really works now going into my next point.
Oh, good.
You rated him as an IGL very highly, but you think he's going to be outplayed tactically by IGL Scream.
I mean, this is a simple solution, Tom. We've already covered it essentially, but
we have not.
Maybe you weren't paying attention. Let me bring it back. You remember the conversation we had about whether, in your words, again, for any French journalists out there, just pay attention. In Tombiz's words, Scream is not a good IGL. Okay, it's just so it's spelled out.
Historically,
it should go this way. Actually, I think for the camera, just so I've got it both ways, they can edit it, whatever. So Scream's not a good IGL. That's what Tom said, not me. I'm not Tom. People sometimes say hi Tombizz or hi Mitch to Tom, but we're not the same
when
person.
Sliggy tried to make Yumpy IGL instead of him because it wasn't working, that also kind of plays in for what we've seen.
What does Sliggy know? Come on, let's get back to this. Carmine Corb in this position. We have one question going through: is Scream a good IGL? And by this point in the semifinals, that question's answered. Yes, he's a fantastic IGL.
You can't use your own predictions as an argument.
Loud. He's looking unbelievable. I'm just looking at what's happened. You're asking me in this game, why do I think KC beat Koi? Well, it's because of what's happened before, Tom, and they've looked incredible. They beat FPX as they should. They beat Loud, upsetting everybody, especially Tom. He was crying in the post-game interview. Me and Scream were ganging up on him. It was incredible. And
I love how your crowd argument doesn't affect Loud either. Like, that's the other thing that's amazing.
Will people cheer for Loud? I guess, you know, one or two people.
I guess.
I think people will see Scream's flowing locks and they'll just fall in love on the spot. They'll start clapping. They won't even know what's happening. So if we're thinking about this realistically, as I think I've done pretty well to do so far, Koi should be, you know, looking like the overdogs here, but KC will come through. Scream will have proven himself, and this new arc is him taking that mantle from Cordamenta. The lit torch will pass hands, and he will become the new IGL on the international level with respect. And the whole time, Tom, you'll be sat on the sidelines.
I genuinely think if you 100% these pick'ems, we should just cancel Valorant. Like, I think it just ends.
Servers are shut down.
Honestly,
we give up.
This is it. Like, this is the peak, because this is such a ridiculous looking bracket that it should just end there. So on my side of things, I would say probably I want to say slightly more logical side of things.
Looks absolutely insane.
NRG versus Loud. Obviously, Optic versus Loud was one of the most sort of common matches we had late in tournaments. It was something that happened quite regularly. I think that the changes NRG have made, I think they've got fantastic players, and I don't know necessarily if everybody is going to be up to speed yet on Loud, so I'm going to edge that one to them. I think it'll be a banger match.
Okay, yeah, I can see your side over there. The reality is, again, another fantastic game that will end up, man, pretty much like most of these iterations are looking good, but yours probably looks a little bit better purely because I would hate to actually see Loud go out early, because I don't want the crowd to lose their home team. Even in this stage, I want both Brazilian teams to make it through. You know, in this, we're looking at Alpha here.
Even though you have them both going out. Not even in the quarterfinals, not even in the semifinals.
Tom, I want cake for dinner every night. You know, it's like we can't have what we want all the time, but that's what I would like to see. You know, your little reality where Loud make it pretty far, and yeah, it's great. I love it. I love it. I'd love cake for dinner too, though, Tom. And
Mitchman and underrating Loud. That's not happened before.
listen,
Anyway, I've got DRX versus Heretics. You've got PaperX versus EG. But I think no matter what, I do think whoever wins, basically out of those two teams, or if Cloud9 are there, is going to be the one sailing through the teams at the lower end of the bracket. I think that for me, Heretics, they'll put up a bit of a fight, but I think ultimately DRX are going to be too strong. And I think the same if PaperX plays versus EG. I just think man for man, pound for pound, they're just a better team.
Yeah, I agreed there for sure. I think there's definitely a stacked side to that bracket, and yeah, that might be a theme as we move on. Let's see.
Yeah. I think again we've got a fair few disagreements when it comes to this side of the bracket, but I also think that some of mine might be well, actually, on the first half, I think mine are more optimistic, and then down below we'll talk about that when we get there. But kicking things off, I think one of the more straightforward games, in all honesty, you've got the brand new Liquid versus Team Secret. I think Team Secret made a change or two here and there, but ultimately still the team we saw in the past. They did all right versus Heretics recently, but ultimately when it came to like top tier opposition in the past, it has been a while since we saw this team, and whenever they played PaperX or Xerxia, they lost. They're up against a literal super team, Mitch.
Yeah, the reality is in this one, and we're going to see it even moving down to the next matchup, this side of the bracket looks incredibly stacked, and Team Secret, look, there's a couple of areas they could have ended in that would look bad, but coming up against Team Liquid round one, this is a team in Team Secret that I could see them in a good iteration of a bracket making a semifinal. They played well. They could beat teams like your Global Esports, your Zeta divisions, maybe a game against Foot, Furia. These would be good games, but Team Liquid, I think 2-0 them and send them home very, very unhappy.
Yeah. Moving on to the next one, I'm going to be brutally honest here. This, for me, was the easiest pick of the whole thing. Yeah. I think that, like, for me, at least, Crew's team is worse than it was before. I think they've lost the two best players on their team. I think Zhanji is a huge pickup. I think that's a great addition. I just don't know really what to expect from Davies, for example. And Melsa was ultimately the player that was let go from the team that got their two players. So I think they're going to get slapped. I think Na'Vi are coming in as one of the strongest teams in the entire tournament. They basically haven't changed anything other than, okay, they lost Artist. That's huge. But they then got CNED. So yeah, I think if they don't 2-0 this, that will be the shock for me.
I can imagine that board meeting. You sit down and go, listen, boss. So yeah, we don't panic. We've lost Artists. And he just like starts breaking things, crying, just like texting his wife, it's over. And then all of a sudden, it's like, but we got CNEDs. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah, okay, let me just text my wife. I need to explain something real quick, and then we're good to go. I think the reality is this, like, I had a motto going through this pick 'em is just I see Navi, I pick Navi. It's just I just click them, I click them, I click them.
Fair.
All the way through. That will proceed on into the finals. I think this team's going to win the whole event.
Yeah, now this is actually where I think we do go very different ways, because you've picked Zeta Division to go through initially. Now, this kind of did break my heart not to pick them, because I really do love this team.
Yeah, you betrayed last, but that's okay.
I think they got, for me, what is one of the hardest matchups in the whole event. I think that Leviathan, of all the teams, they're a sleeper pick for, like, who has made some of the best upgrades. They got my favorite players from Crew, added them to a team that was already fantastic, and ultimately, in my opinion, built maybe the best team in South America. Like, maybe even in America. Like, I think this team is god tier. Like, the fact that you're going to have, like, the option of having Taco or Kesnit, or maybe play them both at the same time. I think Mazzino is still one of the most underrated players that we have within the scene. One of my favorite to watch by far. And then just the structure with NZR as that sort of IGL, and then King and Shy just being fantastic. I think this team's going to be one of the toughest to beat. And although Zeta have had some great runs in the past, it was always in the lower bracket. It was never upper bracket matches. They always started slow. So I just can't see them winning this game.
Yeah, it's a tough call. It really was. And I took a lot of time to think about this one. I really want to see Zeta take a win, first of all. If I see another Japanese team turn up to an international event, lose a game and go home without a win, I can't deal with seeing them cry again, Tom. I don't want to do it. Now, if they're traveling all the way for one series as well, it's just going to be so much worse.
So that's why you picked Giants over Detonation?
Well, listen, I also have to ground myself in reality. And this reality is that on the Zeta division side, you've got someone like Laz. Okay, I don't know with the chamber going out. We saw him play over in Japan recently, and obviously
he can play like anything.
Exactly,
I genuinely believe that.
So we still see him put up numbers on a chamber against the DRX, for example. The Fnatic game wasn't so good, but I'm thinking that if he's coming in here, picking out some other agents, flexing in, maybe sticking with the chamber, he'll be able to deal out some of those jabs that I don't know that everyone on the Leviathan team can deal with jabs, Tom, if I'm being honest. And I think that this squad of Zeta, they are going to be so hungry for the win. There's going to be pressure on them, and I can see them crumbling. I can see South America
Leviathan Fnatic game. Like, that was like one of the craziest games ever, and both teams fought back all the way through. Like, they can take a jab.
Oh, they absolutely can. Most of them. Zeta here now, I think this squad, they're going to come in fired up. They are the underdogs in this series, but I believe after a couple of, the DRX game is really what I'm going off of here. There were a couple of small gleaming lights that I want to pick into, and I want to really believe in them taking that series. But it is, it's maybe a bit of a shot in the dark.
Okay. Now, the next one, again, this one was tough for me because I think that, like, global in the future, I'm really excited for this team. I do think that not only are they coming up against an opponent that might not be great for them, but also I just don't think they've had enough time. Like, we've seen some of the interviews, like, coming through from global where I think I can't remember who it was. Wait, it was Texture. Texture was still speaking in Korean, like in a lot of the stuff. And I know that he's been progressing with his English, but I think that's just going to be a bridge too far for this tournament. I'm a little bit worried about that. But also I think that Vitality are coming in with not only a roster that actually impressed me quite a bit when we saw them like playing up against the likes of 100 Thieves, who have been around for quite a while and had a huge upgrade in terms of cryo, but also just like the way they've built their team, which is they've gone for players in the specific roles that they want them to play. They haven't just gone, you know what, let's get a load of duelists, which unfortunately is exactly what Global have done. So coming into the event, I think that there's still going to be a transition period of some of these players. I mean, we know that SK Rossi's probably not going to play duelist. He's going to be playing like more of supportive roles. You know that I think it's Runsky might be switching as well. I think it's going to be difficult just to get everything in place for this match. And for Vitality, they've already been playing tournaments. They've already been working things out. So I have to favor them.
Yeah, I went with a risky pick here. It's going to get me in trouble with a few friends. But, I thought...
Rob, just remember this. Remember this, Rob.
This is, I'm really banking on the Scream thing coming back to bite you. But I think this one might come back to bite me. I like what Global Esports have done. I like the roster they've thrown together, some of the individuals. I'm a sucker for unknowns coming into tournaments as well. I think prepping up against a team like this would just be such a fucking nightmare. So in that regard, I can see an aspect where they do come out and have that surprise factor to them. Fair. So I wanted to go with that, honestly, because it's an impossible game to judge, because I either believe in what I can see, which is entirely just that Vitality of a track record, they're fantastic and they will body this team, or I vote the other way and assume the unknown is maybe going to catch them off guard, which, looking at the Vitality roster, it's a hard sell. But I think I've loved the content Global Esports have been putting out, and if anyone was to perform an upset here, I want it to be them.
Yeah, that's fair. I think if you're talking about who I'd like to win, then it becomes a little bit more difficult. But in terms of who I think will win, I'm leaning Vitality's way. Now, this next matchup is one, again, I'm a little bit frustrated has happened, because I do think both of these teams are going to have their struggles going into this event. I have met the Foot guys. I like them a lot, but even the interviews that they've had, like I think Sue did one on her channel, it made me feel less confident in like what they're going to do coming into this tournament, because ultimately they haven't changed anything from the team that won VRLs, And they only just won that. They haven't had the most in terms of experience at the top level. And I think they needed to sort of bring in a little bit more to get me feeling confident about the team. I know they trialed like international players as well. I do, however, think that should be enough with this game, because when it comes to RRQ, I genuinely don't know what to expect. Like, they've picked up a couple of players from Boom, who are ultimately one of the teams that looked okay when they came into champs, but didn't really do anything. And they brought up a couple of players in from there and then kept the rest of their roster, from what I can gather. And that, for me, I just don't think is going to be enough for them to do any damage this event.
You know, I feel depressed after listening to that, Tom. Wow, that was a lot of doom and gloom. I don't believe in any of it. I think that realistically, okay, I'm looking at this footballist team, and they are in a position where, again, they've had their disappointments. They've flown around. They've experienced those land lows. I think having the Red Bull Homeground tournament under their belt, actually, it's very funny. You look at a carpet of 0-2s. It's not often that you'll find me going, and I like that. But I did this time because the most recent game, and one that I've almost set up for them in the way they'll come up in the future, was against 100 Thieves, and they didn't do too bad in the opening game there. I think looking at a team that sticks together, that makes very little changes.
They were losing one of the matches 9-0.
But they didn't lose it 13-0, did they, Tom? No, they didn't. The first map was close. What was it? 13-10. There you go. So the reality is, for me, you know, these guys, they've put in the work. They've been together. What was the thing we always said back in the day, back 2 years ago? You ask, what does a Valorant team in EMEA need to succeed? Stick together. That was always the solution, because teams try it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Hell, fly a guy to NA for a week, why don't you? Or for one game. Who knows? Like, it's incredible how quickly teams will end up shifting their rosters. I think what footballs are doing is a good move. I would love to see it pay off for them, and they're getting slowly better. That performance against 100 Thieves, look, you put them there 2 months before, I think they get bodied. Instead, there was a heartbeat there before they were executed. So, you know, that's something. They're getting there.
What? There was a heartbeat before they were executed.
There was a that is your one, and then
is your confidence.
Then the electricity
before they died, they were alive. That's what you've just said.
I don't know. Listen, the power went out in the city. I don't know if there's a local generator. Maybe they're still alive. We just can't hear the little beeps, you know? I'm not sure. All I'll say is,
Mitchman, before they died, they were alive.
Yeah, and now they've got some mystical... I've been doing my rituals, you know? I think they're in a pretty good spot. I think coming in, honestly, they've got a lot of work under their belt. They've been together a long time. They've got LAN experience, and one of the opponents they're likely to face round 2 after a game that they should have an easy opener, an easy warm-up to, is a team that they've just played against and just lost. And what's the thing we always say, Tom? The hardest thing about beating a team is beating them twice. It's like the second time is a million times harder.
That's if it's in the same tournament. It doesn't apply if it's
whatever.
Like a few months later. You got...
I don't care, Tom. I'll be honest with you. I don't care, because they've stuck together, same roster, and they've improved so much since then. So it's going to be even more difficult.
Okay. Well, we're moving on to 100 Thieves. They're playing up against Edward Gaming, again, one of the teams invited from China. For me personally, 100 Thieves come in as one of the strongest teams in the tournament. Again, because they not only have only made one change, and I think there is no arguments from pretty much anyone, well, maybe a few Will fans, that was an upgrade. Like, Cryo was fantastic throughout last year. I think also, the Chamber nerf, we were like, oh, maybe that'll hit him a bit. And then we saw him play more recently. Okay, Chamber was still there, but he was so sick. So I'm not worried about that at all. I do like the EDG roster. I think they're not a bad squad. I think Kang is someone who definitely impressed us quite a bit. And again, I think they're another team that if they came up against some of the other opposition in the tournament, they probably get a bit further. But for me, 100 Thieves are way too strong.
Yeah, look, for Edward to win this game, we would have to completely reconsider where we put them and where we put 100 Thieves. I mean, like you said, 100 Thieves are a solid core 4 team, put together fantastically, and then you put Cryo in, easiest decision of your life. Guy needs a team. He's one of the best players in the world. All right, I'll have him. And he's now flexing in and performing fantastically post-chamber. So there is very little downside to this 100 Thieves team. I mean, you'd struggle to find it.
Well, moving on from this, again, this is what we sort of premised earlier. Probably the toughest game in the tournament to predict. And again, we've gone the same way. Now, we've gone the same way because it's Fnatic. Like, let's be brutally honest here.
Yeah.
I think in terms of actually predicting this match, you would have to be some sort of like Mystic Meg and have the foresight of the universe, or have access to Riot's script, because this is impossible to predict. Like, you've got 2 players coming in from Exet who were fantastic, one in form of an IGL, Zekken, probably the best young talent we have coming into the tournament. You've got the likes of Pancada and Sassy, who are the literal champions, and Tens, who is the Clout King. And then on the other side, you've got Leo, who, again, is still somehow not got like 1 million followers on Twitter, who is just unbelievable as one of those more supportive players who can still stack up. Dirk coming in as one of the best duelists. Chronicle is one of the players from EMEA who's won a championship. Boaster, the most creative IGL I think we might have in Valorant. And Althea, again, another one of those young superstars in the tournament. It's 50-50.
That is a coin flip. I mean, you literally have a grand final matchup here. You have, I think all of these teams would have flown to Brazil to watch this game if you gave them the option, and they didn't have to pay for it because flights are pretty expensive. But
it's a bit pricey.
Yeah, a little bit. But you know, this is peak Valorant, and for it to be a BO3 go home if you lose.
Yeah.
Oh man. The only thing I'll say here, with the pressure on the way, if it was any team other than Fnatic and any team that potentially would come up against Sentinels later on, having Sassy and Pancada in there, what a buff that would be to walk out. Already everybody's hyped for that roster, and then you just bring them out as well in Brazil. My God, you are winning you're probably winning versus Loud. They'll probably cheer for you more. Unreal.
Let's be real. Other than maybe Scream, and I think even that's a push, you've got the 3 most popular players at this entire tournament. Tens is definitely, in terms of just pure streamer numbers, going to be up there. I imagine a lot of the Brazilian fans will be excited to see him. And now he's teamed up with 2 Brazilians. So, yeah, I think that they're going to be incredibly popular. I think also, the one thing that saves it for me for Fnatic is that, okay, I think the Chronicle coming in is going to be uplifting. I think he's someone who's very positive within the server and can win you rounds. And I rate Leo so highly. But again, I think if I was born in North America, I would have very easily gone in the other direction. I think that's the only difference, is that I've got to back my EMEA boys. I think the Fnatic org has been fantastic. I think that the memes we're going to get from this, but ultimately, I don't know. This is the one match where I go, I just don't know. We now move on, because obviously there's so much more of this bracket to go. T1 versus Furia. Now, this is another match, again, where you've got a couple of teams where I do think there's some very, very strong players in there, but ultimately, like, building things, not from scratch, especially in Furia's case, but, like, more so, like, rebuilding. So I think, like, for example, T1, obviously, for them, they've moved from what was a North American roster to a Korean one. I really like their team. I think they've picked up a lot of good Korean players, especially considering how many of them DRX already had. Brought some back from other regions as well. And yeah, I have them taking this. That's the way that my matchup is going, because I think that Zeta's fantastic. I think Munchkin and Sire Player are going to be really hard to beat. But again, it's much of a muchness, because I think you can say the same for the other side.
Yeah, and that's where I've gone with it. I've swung towards Furia taking this because, again, home field advantage, having players like Mazine, like Dijazine in there as well, Musero. We've seen these guys around the block 1 million times. I mean, they know their way around the Valorant server, and I don't think they're going to be able to, this series isn't distinctively one-sided enough for me to not give it to Furia off of that. It sort of falls down to a coin flip, and then I go, okay, they're at home, they've not traveled, they've got crowd on their side. Okay, I'm swinging with them.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, and I think the other thing as well is, I guess more so than anything else, I've realized I've said rebuild, but actually the case is it's not a change for Furia at all. It's actually just a rebuild on the T1 side. My mistake.
Exactly.
Because, like, ultimately, that's probably the biggest advantage that they have is that for Furia, they might have, like, made a change or two or brought a player in. Like, I think Digizin was in sort of later than the rest, but even still, he went and played Champions with this squad, even though it didn't go particularly well. They've had a very, very long time to sort of build things up. So I think that realistically they're in a good spot as a team, but I just think I really like this T1 team. I think that they've got some solid players, and I'm going to edge it to them. But realistically, again, I think this is going to be a relatively 50-50 one. Now, this is where, again, we're going to go back up to the top, and I think we actually have things matching. But I don't know. This one, I think this was actually the one that I changed a couple of times, where I was like, this Team Liquid roster is really nasty, but I don't think they've had enough time yet. That's the only thing.
I think it even comes down to just, for me, the fact that I can't put... I don't think there's anything Liquid could do, even if I gave them, locked them in a void for 2 months where they just got to freeze time outside of it. They got to work on it. Na'Vi are too strong. They've brought in CNED. You've got Angel leading. We've been over it a billion times because we've covered this team a million times and they keep winning. They're fantastic. And I don't know, I'd say they got stronger, but I definitely wouldn't say they've gotten weaker. And that alone, I think they're going to win the tournament.
Damn, okay, you've jumped the gun a little bit there, but
swinging with him. I see Na'Vi.
All right.
Na'Vi. That's how it goes.
It's going out. Well, again, when we go down to the next one, I think we're in such different places because you predicted Zeta and Global to go through, and I predicted Leviathan and Vitality. So ultimately, this matchup is very different for me. I think this Vitality team are going to have one hell of a battle if these two teams face off, but I really do rate this Leviathan team very, very highly. I do just think that the additions of Kesnet and Mazzino are such huge investments for that squad. And I think like the youngsters of like Shy are going to be on fire throughout. They've already had that experience on LAN now. They're only going to be getting better and feeling more confident now that they've had a couple of upgrades. So yeah, I think for me, they're going to take that one. You've got Zeta beating Global.
I do. Again, kind of a close game. A couple of unknowns coming into it. I decided that Zeta, if they're able to take Leviathan, I'm already estimating them as being an incredibly strong team. I think they're going to be able to come through and then take Global, but that would be a close game. And if I'm being honest, probably a Leviathan Vitality game. But, I want to go with my heart here.
Yeah, I think as you have with the next one, because it seems like in a fairly similar spot to what you've done in the other bracket, you have absolutely fucking lost your mind. Because I don't understand how you can watch 100 Thieves pretty much batter, at least in one of the maps, Foot. Foot haven't changed pretty much anything. 100 Thieves come in my opinion, with some of the best players in the tournament, young players as well, talented ones who literally just won a LAN event overseas, and you have Foot beating them.
Yep. Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. I don't know where I want to start with this one. I think I'll go with...
because you went to their house? Is that the reason?
They did bring us to their house. They gave us very nice clothes, very nice food. I had a fantastic time. No, it's not because of that. Maybe a little bit. But the cap as well. By the way, the cap was comfortable. It fit nice.
Are you just trying to get 100 Thieves merch? Is that what this video is?
Just saying, if I was to add up how many pieces of merch did Footballers give me and how many pieces of merch did 100 Thieves give me, it gives me the same result. Footballers win. And that's what I've gone for here. I think the reality is, for me, Footballers played 100 Thieves not that long ago. First map was looking good. Second map, they lost steam completely. We can go into excuses on why that happened. Reality is, I think they'll come back a hell of a lot stronger this time. I think they'll face off against an opponent. In fact, we both think they'll face off against an opponent that they've already played against. And for me, a team that's willing to invest in that long-term success, this is where it can pay off. If the Footballers project is to find success, hell, this is a damn good opportunity to put it to them. I expect a close game out of them. I'm not expecting the win to be a guarantee, but Do I think they can win? Yeah. And with what they've put up so far with that first map to build on it from there, maybe. 100 Thieves, though, do look absolutely incredible. So, I'll say if they gave me 2 hats, then maybe I don't know where I'd be voting. But right now, all I know is what I know, and football is probably take the win. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, right. Well, thankfully in the next one, I don't think we need to go too far on this one. I think we have whoever wins from Fnatic Sentinels basically beating whoever it is in that lower match. I think that even with the crowd, I don't think it should matter too much unless Fnatic really crumble. I think they've just got such a strong team overall that, yeah, we've got them going through to that next one. And I kind of want to move on because I feel like this one might take a while because I know for a fact this is going to piss you off. So this is definitely my boldest call of the bracket. Even looking at it, I go, okay, that's pretty ballsy. But I have Leviathan beating Na'Vi.
Right. So why?
I genuinely think that, like, I think this matchup will be insane. I think the one thing that the sort of two players... So, Leviathan were always close to beating these, like, very, very top opposition. Like, I don't think they were ever a team that got, like, blasted out by anyone. We saw that with Fnatic. It literally came down to, like, mere seconds for them being able to take them down. Now, the difference is the players that they brought in, for me, are just, like, incredible clutch players. Players that will win you rounds when you need it the most. You talk about their game versus Loud when it came to Champions. First map went to overtime. Okay, they then lost the second. They crumbled a little bit in that last one. Then you go to some of their other matchups. I said, that Fnatic one, very, very close. They just weren't quite able to take some of those maps over the line. I think this is their event. I think that they made the right changes. I think that the value of players like Kesnet, I think Kesnet is genuinely like a top 10 player in the world. I genuinely believe that. And I think that in the old crew roster, he had to carry so hard. Like, him and Mazzino had to basically just be the best players in the server by such a distance. And they still managed to make it to, like, semifinals and almost take down Gambit when we go back to, like, 2021. They were always fierce. Now, you've taken those two pieces and you've put them into a good team. Like, given them the structure. You've given them an IGL that can actually, like, lead them through it. And you've given them the God coach. So I just think that's going to be enough this time. Now, do I think that Na'Vi are just going to get bodied? Absolutely fucking not. Of course not. And I think that's why this is a bold call. It's like, ultimately, Na'Vi, on paper, should be better. I just think that this is Leviathan's time to shine.
I can see that. I'm sticking with what's on paper, though. As I say, I see Na'Vi.
As you have
Na'Vi,
with the rest of your list.
That's all I can do. You know me, Tom. I like to sit very, very, very based in a foundation of facts, and that's where I'm gonna reside for now.
Okay. Sure. Well, yeah. Moving on. Again, on that lower side of things, we've got differences. I think Fnatic beating Foot is, well, if Foot are there, I think that's the obvious choice. I'd be surprised if that's not the case. I still think that, like, Fnatic 100 Thieves, if it happens, again, that's going to be so close. Like, that, we've already seen it before, that these teams go tooth and nail, like a victory apiece. So I think that will be one hell of a match. I also think it's the one that will happen, but hey, I appreciate Mitch's optimism. Any hope for Foot in your eyes when it comes to playing against Fnatic?
Well, look, after a close series and now with the ability to shut down a top-level player like Cryo, obviously there's a ton of challenges for Fnatic, but I think their roster is uniquely designed to deal with the beast of a team that Footballist will be bringing to this server. So, yeah, I think probably a bit of hope, but Fnatic will take it in the end.
Well, I think it's definitely safe to say that this has kind of gone off the rails a little bit. We have very different lists, and in terms of actually who's going through, the only matching team is Fnatic, which I actually think is terrifying, because ultimately of all the teams actually the Leviathan one's a little bit bold, and I think NRG could be close, but I still think it's super risky, because Fnatic in just single elimination, I have a lot more faith in them coming through a lower bracket if I'm being brutally honest. I think there's likely to be upsets. So I guess this will be something we have to revisit along the way. You sort of gave this away. Obviously, this has been a very long episode of Split Decision. So just to finish it, I'll just get you to say it one more time. Who's winning the event?
Well, of course, I think that's going to be Team Vitality. No, I'm going with Natus Vincere, of course. They're going to take it all the way.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that there's a few teams that, in my opinion, are not like the boldest call. I think Leviathan are in with a shot, but I think for them to win it would be quite crazy. I think the obvious ones are NRG Loud, probably DRX, and then Na'Vi. Like, those are the ones I'd put right at the top. I think a lot of people putting 100 Thieves up there with them as well, just because of that prior experience. I think I'm going to go with it. See, this is the thing. Logically, I think DRX, and they've even put out like an interview sort of baiting the fact that they're not, we don't feel that comfortable. And the last time they did that, they finished top 3 in an event. So, yeah. But I'm going to go NRG. I genuinely think that artists with that core of like FNS, Victor, I think it's going to be just so ridiculously strong together that I genuinely believe that like they're going to take this tournament. I think that in the long run, there'll be some other teams that bounce back, but I just think that FNS is someone who's so prep heavy, and I think Artis is almost, he always has it, but I think he's going to have that point to prove of like, okay, me leaving the FPX, now Na'Vi boys, wasn't a stupid decision. I wasn't a mistake, and I think he wants to win this event to prove it. So they're the team that I'm backing. But honestly, I think if either of us are correct, I'll be very, very surprised. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we come back in a few weeks and, like, Giants have taken the whole thing. Like, that wouldn't blow me away.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I've got 1 or 2 wrong along the way, but I think I'm pretty on the nail with this one. So maybe speak for yourself there, Tom.
Okay. Well, Mitch is... I'm still just looking at Carmine Corp getting to the semifinals. That's the thing. If it happens, I am more than happy to admit I'm wrong. I know if it doesn't happen, Mitch is just going to make up some bullshit. But either way, we're going to find out. You'll see us, obviously, at the event over in Brazil. So if you are there, please come and say hello. We'll be there for Alpha Group. We're going to get to see live in person if Carmine Corp are going to be as good as Mitchman predicts. And of course, let us know if you think any of the predictions either of us made was stupid. Let us know in the comments down below.
If you
just
think
make sure that you
if you
just
know,
mine,
if you've noticed that Tom's were a little bit, make sure you're the first one in the comments, because obviously everyone's going to be flooding there to go fuck was Tom's. So make sure you get there before everyone else does to say how bad Tom's were.
But also, before you write your mean comments, make sure that you
down below,
like and subscribe as well, because we're gonna see you again, hopefully before the end of Brazil, but if not, after Brazil, to go through all of this madness, and we'll see you then.